Single dad's incredible act saves CEO from plummeting jet. Revealed, 3 Cadillacs transformed lives forever. Mike Thompson wiped the sweat from his brow, the scent of motor oil filling his lungs. Raising 2 kids on his own in suburban Chicago was never easy, but he prided himself on those quiet moments beneath the hood of an old Ford truck, where mechanical resolutions intertwined with his fatherly duties. Yet, even as he expertly tightened bolts, the pangs of an unrelenting discontent gnawed at him. The dreams he had once pursued flickered like distant stars, overshadowed by everyday bills and parent-teacher conferences. Could he ever reclaim the life he'd willingly set aside? Suddenly, a shadow swooped across the garage. Glancing up, Mike's heart dropped as he spotted a private jet spiraling dangerously through the sky. Adrenaline surged, overwhelming him with a sense of purpose. Without thinking, he bolted toward the road, arms flailing. A surreal clarity replaced doubts in an instant. His father had always spoken of loyalty, of standing tall in chaos. He wasn't merely a mechanic. He was a father ready to act. "Help! Over here!" he shouted, desperation fueling his voice. The roaring engines drowned out everything else, but Mike's resolve solidified. He saw other motorists pulling over, their faces masks of confusion. As he relayed details to emergency services, questions swirled in his mind. Was it fear that drove him, or the instinctual need to protect, to prove himself? In that critical moment, he realized the inexplicable strength of a father's heart beats louder than fear. Just as the jet skimmed the treetops, it found its ground, less a crash, more a rough landing fueled by Mike's calculated warning. Relief washed over him as he stepped away, his pulse still racing. Flashing lights of emergency vehicles flooded the scene and turned into a whirlwind of camera flashes, media stories redrawing him as an unexpected hero. Yet beneath the weight of recognition, doubt crept in. Would this newfound fame change how his neighbors saw him? Had he traded his day-to-day struggles for the spotlight of a life he didn't quite belong to? Before he could sift through the chaos of thoughts, Mike received a call that shook him to his core. A distant relative's voice spilled the unsettling truth. He was the rightful heir to a Cadillac dealership, a legacy tarnished by misfortune, but now ripe for reclamation. This revelation was both elusive and alluring. Could he really abandon his grease-smeared coveralls for crisp suits? The notion of wealth threatened to drown out values he placed above all, a simple life built on hard work for his kids. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos.
And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. Mike sighed, staring at the bustling street where he once tinkered away his hours. The luxury loomed like a mirage. Would embracing the Cadillac legacy mean forsaking every drop of sweat invested in his role as a mechanic and father? He felt trapped, caught between the spirit of humility that seeped into his very being and the siren call of an opulence he never sought. Unease twisted like a knife in his gut as the news trucks rolled by, delivering his dramatic narrative to eager audiences. He felt smaller than ever. Who would understand the weight of this dilemma? Decisions rushed to form, but with each thought came an unsettling reminder. The intricacies of family, dreams deferred, destinies intertwined, prodding unrelentingly at his chest. The man who had saved a life now questioned his own. And as the world turned to watch the spectacle, he couldn't help but wonder, in a moment of apparent heroism, had he lost himself completely? The roar of the crowd faded into a low hum in Mike's ears as he stepped away from the scene, still processing the whirlwind of events that had thrust him into an unexpected spotlight. Cameras danced around him, creating a dizzying barrage of flashes. In that moment, he felt like a character in someone else's story, an unworthy hero navigating a plot he didn't write. Anxiety gripped him tighter. He wanted to retreat to the familiarity of his garage, to the reassuring sounds of tools clanking together amidst the smell of gasoline. But didn't he owe it to his children, to himself, to explore the very legacy that beckoned from afar? Mike took a deep breath, staring at the asphalt that had always felt more real than the fleeting fame. What would be the price of this new path? The juxtaposition of his humble life and the glitzy dealership weighed heavily on his mind. The next morning, under the pale light of dawn, Mike made his way to the dealership, a sprawling building far removed from the simplicity of his garage. Every step forward felt like crossing a chasm of doubt. As he approached the entrance, he hesitated. The gleaming Cadillacs inside seemed to whisper promises of a life that glittered with ease and comfort, yet something held him back. Was it admiration or envy? Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with the sound of energetic sales tactics and crisp suits, and Mike suddenly felt like an outsider peering in. The sleek glass counters, attentive employees, and polished showrooms of luxury cars created a dissonance that amplified his insecurities. He was just a mechanic, a dad whose world revolved around wrenches and oil kilters. Would he fit in here, or would he forever be overshadowed by the polished lives surrounding him? As he wandered through the showroom, an idea flickered.
What if he could bridge both worlds? Drawing from his experience as a mechanic, he could breathe new life into the outdated operation. He recalled the camaraderie he shared with his clients back in the garage, the connection forged over honest work and shared stories. The dealership's pristine exterior held untapped potential, and maybe it needed a touch of authenticity, an advocate for mechanics and everyday drivers alike. Determined, he asked for a meeting with the dealership's manager. His heart pounded in his chest as he pitched his vision, highlighting how a personal touch could reshape the dealership's reputation and increase customer trust. The manager's initial skepticism was tangible, yet Mike pressed on. He showcased the value of relationship building, the importance of ensuring that all customers, whether they drove a classic Cadillac or a used beater, felt welcomed and understood. That first meeting turned into a subsequent dialogue about strategy, and for the first time in years, Mike felt excitement take hold. He wasn't just daydreaming, he was formulating a plan, one that could intertwine his love for mechanics with the essence of the dealership. But he still wrestled with doubt. Could he truly step into this new role without losing sight of who he was? Days turned into weeks as he balanced his responsibilities as a father and a budding entrepreneur. Each morning, he reviewed dealership reports and customer feedback, absorbing information like a sponge. Every night, he returned to his garage, finding solace in the grease and familiarity that had once defined him. His transformation became a dual journey, one where he cultivated skills that were foreign yet exhilarating, while rediscovering the passion he thought had been eclipsed. However, the louder his aspirations grew, the more the external pressures mounted. Whispers evolved into inquiries about his competence. Could a mechanic truly master the world of high-stakes sales? The looming question that now haunted him was whether he'd be able to face the naysayers once he took his place at the dealership's helm. In the midst of this personal metamorphosis, an unexpected message arrived, a looming confrontation that would challenge his newfound resolve, setting the stage for a clash that could alter his path irrevocably. Would he take on the challenge, or retreat back to the shadows of routine? The weight of Mike's decision lingered like the faint smell of motor oil in his garage, a reminder of where he came from amid the corporate chaos. The message that had appeared on his phone filled him with a sense of urgency. A prominent automotive magazine wanted an interview, but it wasn't just idle chit-chat. The focus would be on the dealership's innovative changes he had proposed, and how he, a mechanic, was now shaping the narrative. His palms sweaty, he prepared for questions that would peel back the layers of his rapidly evolving identity. He spent sleepless nights pondering what the focus of this interview should be. Should he present himself as the everyman, a mechanic turned sales strategist, or should he lean into a narrative of expertise that he felt was often questioned, particularly by the polished suits in the dealership? Each angle felt loaded with potential pitfalls, and Mike was desperate to navigate them without losing authenticity. The day of the interview arrived, and as he stepped into the dealership, he was met with applause from the sales team. Glimmers of camaraderie sparked among them, but he knew that their approval meant little if he couldn't convince the journalist that he belonged. He went through the motions, laughing at jokes and nodding along to the upbeat discussions about targets and promotions, all while drowning in his internal monologue, a cacophony of self-doubt. When the camera started rolling, Mike felt exposed, stripped bare beneath the lights. He launched into his vision, discussing relationship-building techniques and the necessity of understanding customer needs. But when the interviewer pressed him further with pointed questions, the facade threatened to crack. "So, Mike, what makes you think a mechanic can lead this dealership into a profitable future?" In that instant, the weight of the world settled on his shoulders. He could feel the sharp gaze of skepticism. Would this be where he faltered?
Thoughts raced through his mind like tires screeching on pavement. Suddenly, clarity emerged. Because I've seen what unites customers and mechanics. It's trust. He drew on vivid memories of long conversations with clients, the satisfaction of getting someone back on the road without feeling cheated. This was his truth. He couldn't back away now, not when he was so close to integrating his past into this new chapter. The room fell silent, and a hesitant nod from the reporter inspired a burst of courage. My aim isn't to outshine anyone here. Instead, it's to build a dealership where every customer enters feeling like they are part of the family. That's what will lead us to growth. As the interview wrapped up, Mike felt a wave crash over him, a mixture of relief and accomplishment. But the path ahead was still foggy. He'd ignited their interest, but how would he transform that spark into lasting change? He needed tangible results, something actionable that would silence the critics and validate his position. Back at home, a familiar comfort awaited. The hum of an engine being tuned up grounded him. He envisioned strategies to implement in the dealership, tenets he could instill to connect deeply with customers. Rather than selling cars, he wanted to create solutions that thrived on understanding individual needs. While Mike began drafting a concrete plan, whispers began surfacing within the dealership. Colleagues approached him with careful curiosity, but some held back, clearly still harboring doubt about his legitimacy in this new environment.
The divide seeded itself deeper. An internal conflict grew as he grappled with not only the need for respect, but also a yearning for acceptance. That night, still seated in his garage, Mike realized he was facing more than just external scrutiny. Every attempt to assert himself awakened old insecurities about his self-worth. Was he simply a mechanic dressing in salesman's clothes? Did he have the mettle to step even further beyond that initial image and flourish in a world where success was often defined by sleek suits and flashy numbers? With a heavy heart yet iron resolve, Mike decided to confront one of his biggest critics, a senior salesman known for his harsh assessments. The time had come to face proof of his worth, a necessary test of his resolve that would either bind him more closely to his goal or push him back into the shadows of self-doubt. Could he prepare to accept the risks of that confrontation, or would he retreat once again into the comforting shadows of his past? The days that followed the interview twisted in Mike's mind, each moment a duel between his growing self-doubt and an unyielding desire to prove himself. He spent hours alone in his garage, fingers tracing the contours of the vehicles, as if searching for answers hidden in their sleek frames. The offset hum of his tools formed a rhythm that underscored his thoughts, a persistent reminder that change was not for the faint-hearted. Determined to take the plunge, he set a meeting with Dan, the seasoned salesman notorious for his scathing critiques. The very idea of facing him was a formidable task. Dan was known for his cutting remarks that had left many in the dealership feeling defeated. Yet the thought of cowering in silence felt unbearable. Mike needed to stand firm, a crucial moment that demanded his courage. As he approached the meeting room, Mike's heartbeat accelerated. Each pulse seemed to shout warnings. The fluorescent lights above buzzed in quiet mockery. He took a deep breath as the door swung open. Dan was seated at the polished table, arms crossed, an image of skepticism personified. "Mike," Dan began, his tone sharp, "I heard you had a little chat on camera. Care to share how a grease monkey plans to change an industry that's been running fine without him?" There it was, the condescension woven into his words. In that moment, everything inside Mike simmered. He could back down, accept the role of the dismissed mechanic, or he could confront this obstacle head-on. "I don't claim to know everything, Dan, but I do know what customers want. They want honesty and reliability. That's what we're lacking, and I'm not about to let that slide." Dan chuckled softly, the laughter seeping with doubt. "You think just going soft on customers is enough to drive sales? Or do you think pallying up will bail us out of financial trouble?" Something within Mike clicked. He realized this wasn't just about sales. It was a chance to redefine relationships within the dealership. It's not about being soft, it's about being smart. Building loyalty isn't just a strategy, it's our survival. I believe investing time in our customers will outstrip quick sales. The tension in the room swelled, a palpable force pressing against both men. Mike felt sweat bead at his temples, but he stood tall, eyes steady on his critic. People don't just remember the car they buy, they remember how they felt when they bought it. That connection transforms sales into relationships. Dan's expression flickered, a hint of intrigue breaking through his stormy facade. "So you want to be some kind of dealership therapist? Customers don't care.
Then you're not listening to what they really want, Mike interrupted, emboldened. They want real. They want authenticity, something our polished pitches lack. If we ignore this, we're just selling the people's perception of a car. I want to offer them the experience of true automotive care. Silence fell, and Mike's heart pounded in his chest. He had thrown down a gauntlet. Now all he could do was wait for Dan's retort. Would he dismiss him outright, or was there a flicker of acknowledgement there? Each second felt eternal, laden with the weight of transition, a tipping point against uncertainty. Then, incredibly, Dan leaned back slightly, the corner of his mouth twitching, a reflection of reconsideration? I suppose there's merit to that. Still, a showroom isn't a therapy session. You'll need to show results. Mike allowed himself to breathe, a fragile truce between promise and ridicule forming in the air. Each word now felt like an ember igniting something deeper than he anticipated, a chance to prove he could not only survive, but thrive. The next days became a blur of strategic planning. Mike organized customer feedback sessions, emphasizing their experience over traditional sales pitches. Each interaction unveiled hidden preferences and concerns, a new kind of data that felt more vibrant than mere numbers. Yet even as momentum built, the silent whispers in the dealership college were impossible to ignore. He was still the mechanic striving for a seat on the corporate throne. A suspicion hovered over every handshake and friendly exchange. As excitement melded with anxiety, Mike prepared for the next crucial step, the follow-up meeting with the dealership's leadership, where he would pitch the feedback findings and his innovative customer engagement strategy. Would he breach the gap between skepticism and acceptance, or would he find himself trapped again in a cycle of judgment? The stakes had risen, the spotlight narrowed. He was inching closer to a potentially pivotal breakthrough. The moment that could shift everything for him loomed on the horizon, unanswered questions lingering like shadows in the dawning light. What would he discover about his own capabilities as he presented his ideas to the dealership's upper echelon?
The day had finally arrived, and anticipation thrummed through Mike's veins like a live wire. He stepped into the conference room, where the air was thick with expectation, and the executive team's skeptical gazes bore down upon him. Each desk bore remnants of a polished corporate look, a stark reminder of the formality he felt ill-suited to enter. "All right, Mike," the dealership manager, Linda, beckoned. "Let's hear your proposal. You've been given a unique chance to present your findings. Make it count." The words echoed in Mike's mind as he stood behind the podium, paper in hand, palms clammy but resolute. His heart raced, oscillating between the thrill of possibility and the weight of impending judgment. He gathered his breath, recalling all those nights alone in his garage, piecing together thoughts mixed with passion and purpose. "Thank you," he began, looking at the sea of faces. "I know my position has been unconventional, but I believe a new approach to customer engagement can redefine our success." His voice steadied with clarity as he shifted from the uncomfortable mechanic to a confident advocate for change. He detailed the feedback he had gathered, delving into the emotional experiences customers craved rather than the mere sale of a vehicle. He painted a vivid picture of how trust could translate into loyalty, a concept foreign to many in the room, but one that lit a fire within him. When customers feel valued beyond their purchase, they return. They bring friends, they write reviews, and ultimately they elevate our brand. Suddenly, an executive snicker sliced through the room. It was Eric, the same executive who had made it his mission to remind Mike of his inferior status. "And how do you propose we change our mechanics to serve as those therapists?" A flicker of doubt threatened to crash over him, but Mike held his ground. "By training, teaching them to listen, to empathize. We need to not only fix the car, but also to forge a connection with the individual behind the wheel. Half the battle is knowing what they really need." The room was silent, yet the others were engaged, some leaning forward, intrigued. Mike pressed on, harnessing the charged atmosphere to reveal a case study of a successful dealership that had pivoted toward customer-centric practices. The results, a 40... As the words spilled out, Mike began to visualize himself as more than just a mechanic trying to fit in. In those moments, he was an architect of transformation, building bridges of understanding between people and their vehicles. At last, he concluded, lifting his eyes to meet theirs with newfound confidence. "I believe we can create an environment where customers feel heard, respected, and valued. This is not just a business model. This is a revolution in how we serve." The room fell quiet once more, a void amplifying his pulse. Linda shifted in her chair, breaking the silence with a question that could either lift him or set him back. "And what if this doesn't resonate? What's your backup plan if this doesn't bear fruit?"
Mike hesitated. But in that moment of uncertainty, he felt the weight of potential failure align with his resolve. Then I'll learn from it. But I refuse to stand by and allow our dealership's future to stagnate out of fear. Risk is the birthplace of innovation. As the executives exchanged glances, Mike could taste a shift, an intangible crack forming in their staunch skepticism. The road ahead felt lined with more uncertainties, but a flame of hope ignited within him. Yet doubts still lingered. Would this be enough to break through the layers of doubt? He just needed one person to believe. But as they deliberated, Mike sensed a ripple of tension permeate the room. Would they take the leap into the unknown with him, or return to their familiar patterns? The moment teetered at the edge of decision, and Mike could only wait, bracing himself for the answer that could alter everything. The silence curled around Mike like smoke, thick and suffocating. Each passing moment stretched painfully as he stood before the executive team, their expressions a blend of contemplation and skepticism. He couldn't bear the thought of returning to the garage, knowing he had let an opportunity slip through his fingers. As Linda's question echoed in his mind, he wrestled with a sudden clarity. This was more than a proposal. It was a declaration of his identity. When the room remained still, he took a calculated risk, leaning into the unexpected openness that was surfacing amongst them. "If this doesn't resonate," he explained slowly, "then I will reassess. I'll gather feedback, refine my approach, and try again. But sitting back and doing nothing is not an option. Our customers are worth it, and so are we." An uneasy whisper rippled across the faces of his colleagues. Just as doubt threatened to claw its way back, Linda spoke again. "I appreciate your passion, Mike. It takes guts to stand here and present such a radical shift. We need time to process this." It wasn't the enthusiastic response he had hoped for, but at least it wasn't outright dismissal. As she continued, Mike felt a surge of determination wash over him. He wasn't merely a cog in this dealership anymore. He was a vital force of change.
Each word they shared further solidified his belief in what he was championing. "Why don't you come up with a pilot program?" one of the junior executives suggested thoughtfully. "See if your ideas can be implemented on a smaller scale before a full rollout." Considering this, Mike grasped at the lifeline, the spark of an idea igniting in the back of his mind. "Absolutely. I can set up training sessions focused on soft skills for our mechanics. We could also introduce customer feedback seminars, require input to tailor our service further." Excitement bubbled just below the surface, but the glares from Eric remained oppressive. The executive's disdain wrapped around Mike like a thread he couldn't shed. Would Eric sabotage his ambitions? That fear gnawed at him, motivating him to craft a strategy that would even impress his most vocal detractor. "What if we send a pilot team to local community events?" Mike suggested, his voice firm and authoritative. "The dealership would have a presence beyond just selling cars. Mechanics could engage with customers, equip them to share first-hand experiences and feedback." The executives exchanged glances. Could this blend of outreach and empathy resonate within the corporate framework? Would it showcase the very spirit of innovation Mike was advocating for? Even Eric leaned back, pondering, his expression momentarily neutral. Then, to Mike's surprise, Linda interjected. "You're on the right path, Mike. Let's give you a chance to flush this out further. But keep in mind this isn't just a tilt at social goodwill. We need tangible outcomes and metrics." "Absolutely," Mike nodded, adrenaline heightening his focus. "Measurable results will demonstrate our investment in this shift of culture." He stepped down from the podium with urgency, heart racing. This was an opportunity not just to change the dealership, but to redefine himself. As he exited the conference room, he sensed a change within himself that could only be described as renewal. This wasn't just about proving a point to the executives. It was about unlocking a potential he hardly knew existed. The doubts ebbing within him were replaced with a determination that throbbed insistently. In his mind, scenarios unfolded. Possible tactics, unforeseen challenges. He would unleash everything behind the second chance. And Eric? Mike would find a way to confront him on the competitive playing field, not from a place of fear, but from the position of a leader in innovation. Back at his desk, he turned his phone over, focusing on the work ahead. Ideas began to form, strategies to execute, and soon he was immersed in a whirlwind of creativity. But lurking beneath was the nagging sensation of Eric's inevitable undermining moves. A turbulent battle awaited him before dawn. As he gazed out the window at the fading sunlight, he realized that this journey wouldn't merely be about the dealership, it would ultimately transform him. But doubt lingered, like a shadow.
Would he be able to rise to the occasion, or would he falter under the pressure when Eric made his next attack?
The very thought sent a shiver racing down his spine. The journey ahead was fraught with uncertainty, but he was determined. The stage was set, and it was time to take the next leap. The next morning, Mike's resolve pulsed through him like a newly charged battery. The air in the dealership buzzed with a mix of excitement and apprehension, and he understood it mirrored his own inner turmoil. Executives were an unpredictable force, and today he'd have to prove he wasn't just a voice in the background. He needed to convert that initial acceptance of his proposal into concrete steps forward. He arrived early, knowing that creating a solid foundation for his pilot program was paramount. Each desk in the office reflected its occupant's personality, cluttered with reports and notes, like unique landscapes mirroring diverse professional outlooks. Mike settled in, creating his own sacred space designed for breeding ideas and crafting plans. The weight of Eric's judgment loomed large, almost tangible, but he channeled that anxiety into productivity. No more hesitations. He needed a concrete plan. Mike started outlining a structured approach for his training sessions. He envisioned sessions that not only focused on soft skills, but also incorporated vehicle technology updates for the mechanics. The blend of interpersonal skills training with technical knowledge would resonate in a way that ensured the team felt well-rounded and confident interacting with customers. As he scribbled notes, he felt his excitement grow. If he succeeded in demonstrating that the human touch enhanced sales and customer satisfaction, it would obliterate any doubts about his capabilities. This wasn't merely about redefining processes. It was sculpting him into a new version of himself, a leader who inspired confidence rather than fear. But as he drafted his proposal, Mike couldn't ignore the constant gnawing feeling that accompanied his enthusiasm. Eric would see this as an opportunity to strike. Mike's instinct screamed caution. He needed to anticipate probable sabotage. What would Eric do if he felt threatened? Would he leverage his influence with the executives to crush Mike's ambitions before they took flight? A sudden realization ignited inside him. To counter Eric's potential maneuvering, Mike needed allies within the company. He refused to shoulder this burden alone. He called a few members of the dealership team, those who he believed understood the essence of the new direction he was outlining. They gathered in a small back office, and Mike animatedly presented his vision. Their energy fueled Mike's ambition. They brainstormed ideas, each person adding layers of brilliance to his initially solitary vision. As discussions flourished, Mike began to see the outline of a powerful coalition form.
Constructive criticism from fellow team members sharpened his proposal, bringing forth revelations about the strengths they could combine. He gleaned insights into other departments' challenges and how a unified approach could serve them all. Each laugh, each moment of revelation drew Mike further from the long shadows of self-doubt. Here, among these like-minded individuals, he felt the stirrings of possibility. Their shared laughter filled the small office, creating a bubble of creativity that seemed impervious to the outside world, even to the lurking threat of Eric. However, as the day progressed, Mike could sense a shift. Something hung in the air, heavier than before. Eric was brimming with simmering resentment, and Mike had a feeling he had caught wind of the blooming plan. As they passed each other in the hallway, Eric's gaze held a charged malice that sent prickles up Mike's spine. The pivotal confrontation stretched closer. The stakes were rising as he prepared for the upcoming meeting to present his finalized proposal to the executive team. Could he navigate this precarious landscape? Would he galvanize his team and weather Eric's inevitable pushback? The moment was drawing near when Mike realized his development depended on acknowledging, confronting, and ultimately overcoming the looming threat posed by Eric. How could he maneuver through this corporate battlefield and emerge unscathed, inspiring others along the way? In a world where loyalties could shift like sand, Mike felt his determination sharpen. The gauntlet had been thrown, and he had to decide not only how to face Eric, but how to transform this challenge into an opportunity for unprecedented growth, his and the dealership's. What lay before him was not just another meeting, but a turning point where aspirations would clash with reality, and the true measure of his worth would be tested. Would he rise to the occasion, or would he falter under the weight of personal and professional stakes? The time had come to face the music and demand new rhythm. The anticipation of the meeting gnawed at Mike as he sat in his small office, the muted sounds of the dealership filtering through the closed door. He glanced at his reflection in the window, noting the increased resolve etched across his features. The stakes had never felt higher, and the weight of future choices pressed on him like a physical force.
To succeed, he would have to engage not just his plan, but his very essence of who he wanted to be. As Mike rehearsed his pitch in the confines of his mind, he identified key arguments he hoped would resonate with the executives. It was essential to articulate the vision behind his training sessions clearly, highlighting the connection between innovative sales techniques rooted in empathy and genuine customer interaction. He deliberately drew on his own experiences, recalling the times he felt unheard and dismissed in past jobs.
Those memories empowered him, fueling his commitment to carve out a different path for his team. However, an unexpected whisper of doubt drifted in, tainting his thoughts. What if the executives, including Eric, were dismissive? Mike shook his head, unwilling to surrender to fear. He had poured his energy into refining this program, and now he must exude confidence, radiating the conviction that this new approach could breathe life into a weary sales floor. The conference room became a battleground of ideas and intentions, filled with anticipation. As Mike stepped inside, his spirit braced for impact. The executives sat around the long table, their expressions inscrutable, but he noted Eric's posture, rigid and watchful. Mike felt the urge to retreat swell within him, but he quickly recognized the familiar vulnerability lurking beneath. He had to confront it directly. As he launched into his presentation, Mike maintained eye contact, gauging the reactions of each executive. He laid out the potential benefits of his program, weaving together stories that illustrated the human capacity for connection in a business environment often dominated by numbers and reports. He saw a flicker of interest from some executives, a small victory that fueled his momentum. But Eric remained a looming presence. His interruptions were calculated, crafted to undermine Mike's authority. Each cutting comment was delivered with a veneer of professionalism, yet Mike could sense the underlying hostility. The tension in the room thickened, wrapping around Mike like a tightly coiled rope, pulling him into a confrontation he had instinctively prepared for. Let's not forget, Mike, that this is a complex industry. Do you really believe that merely enhancing soft skills can redirect the sales we desperately need? Eric sneered, his tone dripping with condescension. The room went silent, and Mike felt the coarse fabric of Eric's challenge brush against the edges of his resolve. This was the moment to pivot, to engage head-on instead of retreating into defensiveness. With intense clarity, he replied, "It's not merely about enhancing soft skills, Eric. It's about shifting our entire approach to create an unmatched customer experience. People want to feel valued, and that's where we need to start." The moment hung suspended, and Mike noticed a few heads nodding in tentative agreement. It was a flicker of promise amidst the rising storm, a sign that his team's effort wasn't in vain. As he pressed on with more supporting data and testimonials from the team, he felt the fire inside him rekindle. The words flowed with a force propelled by the multitude of visions he had crafted in that cramped back office with his allies, the laughter, the brainstorming sessions, the shared dreams. That energy surged through him like an electric current, bolstering his fight for their collective vision. But amidst the budding belief, he caught a glimpse of Eric's face, and a sense of foreboding flared anew. It was all too clear that the confrontation was far from over. How would Eric strike back? What would he do next? As the meeting progressed and tensions continued to rise, Mike acknowledged that this battle was more than just a campaign for a training program. It was a defining moment in his career, a crucible that would determine not only his professional worth, but his growth as a leader. With an exhale that felt like a mixture of readiness and apprehension, Mike braced for the next round, knowing he needed to retain this momentum. What strategies could he deploy to engage the executives further, and how would he navigate Eric's response to undermine him, pushing himself toward the edge of becoming the leader he aspired to be? The answers lay shrouded in the encounter yet to come. The atmosphere in the conference room teetered on a razor's edge, and Mike felt the weight of expectations choking him. After launching a spirited defense of his training program, he sensed that the tides had shifted, albeit slightly. A murmur of support from some executives cracked the tension like a pin breaking the surface of a taut balloon, but Eric's disdain hung thick in the air, like a storm cloud waiting to unleash its fury. As the meeting progressed, Mike knew he couldn't afford to back down. Every ounce of focus needed to be directed toward rebutting Eric's challenges while reinforcing his vision. He considered how to pivot the conversation, weighing his words carefully. He had to do more than just react. He needed to architect a robust dialogue that showcased the practicality of his proposal. "Let's take a moment to recognize where our previous methods have led us," Mike said, his voice steady despite the uneasy glances exchanged around the room.
Sales figures haven't just stagnated, we've seen a decline in customer satisfaction. Our approach must evolve or face obsolescence. He looked directly at Eric, the weight of his point settling like a challenge. This isn't just about pushing products, it's about creating relationships that sustain our business. A good experience leads to loyalty. We shouldn't overlook that. The silence in the room was palpable, and for a heart-stopping moment, it felt like the executives were weighing his words. Mike could feel adrenaline pulse through him, and he didn't want to waste that momentum. He highlighted a successful case study from a competitor who had embraced a similar approach, enhancing their focus on the emotional side of sales, and reaped the rewards. As he spoke, Mike drew on stories, invoking real scenarios where teams thrived through empathy. Each anecdote solidified his assertion that emotional intelligence wasn't merely a soft skill, it was the cornerstone of successful customer engagement in today's market. Eric cleared his throat, as if preparing to strike back, his expression hardening.
But how do you plan on measuring the effectiveness of this so-called emotional connection? Frivolous initiatives need to show results, Mike. Otherwise, we're throwing good money after bad. Mike bristled. This wasn't frivolous. It was a lifeline. We can implement metrics that track customer engagement and satisfaction post-purchase. By establishing this training, not only will our sales staff be more equipped to connect with clients, but we will also be addressing the very real issue of retention. It's not just about immediate sales, but long-term growth. Eric's eyes narrowed, but some of the other executives shifted in their seats, appearing more receptive. Mike took a mental note of their reactions, Nina subtly leaning forward, Raj jotting down notes. This was the opportunity to harness that growing interest, to galvanize them toward belief in a vision that now felt attainable. But as the meeting came to a close, Eric's voice reverberated ominously. We will discuss your proposal further, Mike, but I must warn you, sometimes it takes more than just good intentions to drive sales. With a final glance at Eric, Mike felt a surge of something he hadn't expected. Resolve. Eric's skepticism did not define his initiative. It would only fuel his desire to prove him wrong. As they dispersed, Mike replayed the encounter in his mind, analyzing every moment, every counter. The confrontation had invigorated him in a way he hadn't anticipated, solidifying his role not just as a facilitator of change, but as a leader willing to embrace the discomfort of conflict for growth. Outside the conference room, he spotted the window where he often found solace, a view of the dealership bustling with activity. He realized he needed to align his internal drive with external expressions of leadership. The transformation had begun, but there was more to confront. The obstacles were still looming, and Eric was not done. What strategies could he adopt moving forward? Every encounter risked igniting new challenges. As Mike pondered these questions, he felt the weight of responsibility, not just to his vision, but to his team, the very people who believed in him fiercely. It was time to strategize. How could he leverage their support while continuing to dismantle layers of doubt swirling in Eric's shadow? The chess match had just begun, and he was determined to claim victory. Months passed since the fateful meeting, and Mike Thompson found himself staring out at the lot of the dealership he had once viewed with trepidation. The glare of the sun illuminated the sleek Cadillacs lined up like soldiers ready for duty. But this time, they represented far more than mere luxury vehicles. They were the embodiment of transformation, both for the dealership and for himself. Mike had conquered the doubts that once clouded his vision. The pilot program he had launched had exceeded expectations, generating a noticeable uptick in customer satisfaction, driving sales upward, and fostering an atmosphere where employees embraced the shift toward relationship building. The whispers of skepticism about his competence dissipated, supplanted by recognition of his innovative leadership. Just this past week, the dealership had received an award for Best Customer Engagement Strategy from a prestigious automotive association. It was tangible acknowledgment of his impact, proof that the wisdom he gained from years as a mechanic, in understanding both the human side of customers and the intricate details of their vehicles, could change the narrative within a high-stakes sales environment. But however sweet that victory felt, it was not the only mark of change. Every day, Mike returned home where he felt valued even more as a father. The way his children beamed with pride when they spoke of their dad's work was worth more than any accolade. The bond they had forged through shared dinners and stories of his battles at the dealership had restored his confidence not just as a worker, but as a man of integrity and influence. In his garage that very evening, Mike lost himself in the familiar rhythm of tools clinking against metal. Each motion was meditative, reminding him of the determination that had brought him to this point. He now understood that his journey encompassed much more than saving a CEO or rumored inheritance.
It was a profound quest for self and purpose. The grease beneath his nails became a badge of honor, symbolizing the hard-won lessons that had shaped him. He reflected on Eric's continued skepticism. Mike had not only faced Eric's resistance head-on, but had guided the senior salesman into conversations that eventually led him to buy into the changes. It was this skill he had honed that reinforced his competency. He wasn't there to replace others, but to amplify their strengths while creating a supportive environment. His latest initiative involved training sessions specifically designed to blend soft-skill education with mechanical knowledge, building a bridge between the sales team and technicians. If someone were to engage Eric now, he wouldn't merely dismiss Mike's ideas, he would reflect on how those ideas improved the dealership's ecosystem. Junctions of doubt no longer had the power to overshadow him. His commitment to growth delivered lasting changes not just in his professional life, but also in the fabric of his family connections. Sitting in the garage now, he felt anchored in both realms, solidifying who he was becoming, a figure of resilience and integrity. That evening, when his children trudged into the garage, tired from school yet vibrant with enthusiasm, Mike recognized the most important achievement of all, balancing his dreams with their reality.
Each moment spent nurturing their aspirations brought him a fulfilling sense of confidence that rivaled any recognition he had garnered within the dealership. Looking toward the future, Mike envisioned building a career that intertwined his past and present with one guiding principle: authenticity leads to transformational leadership. So much had changed, yet his core identity remained intact. The mechanic who saved a life now thrived in a world of success, wielding influence with compassion, stamina, and an unwavering commitment to integrity. As he closed the garage door behind him, he felt satisfaction wash over him like a warm embrace. He had achieved not just professional success, but deep personal fulfillment, proving to himself that pursuing dreams, even in the face of adversity, could forge paths toward greatness. Mike Thompson was no longer just a single dad heralding grease-stained hands. He was a leader, a role model, a beacon of hope showing that success begins with being true to oneself. This is the moment for you to embrace your own journey. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and make a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Your voice matters. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions. Don't wait even one more second to share.